What is up, folks? I am back with another update on the game's progress for everybody that may be interested in following along. So, as usual, I've kind of been changing my style of making these too quickly, so I've got a lot of stuff to show you, so let's jump into it so I don't prattle on for way too long. So, yeah, let's see. I've been doing some work on a cloud idea that I've got, which is going to be where you see all these weird shapes over here. So you can just kind of ignore those for now. I'll have something better to announce in the future, hopefully. Right now we just got some of the math working behind that. Basically building custom shaders, which is not an easy system. Another thing that I've done is basically the main focus I've had right now is I'm trying to get the environment and terrain into the game with this dungeon generation system so that everything will function smoothly and be kind of dynamic per level, and everything can be loaded at runtime, yada yada yada. So I've got most of that working now. So you'll probably, if you've been watching these videos for a while, you remember that the random dungeon generator does a lot of stuff. It kind of keeps track of everything. It generates all the grid sizes. You can have a lot of custom variables. Now there's also a insertion technique for special rooms. So you can insert as many special rooms as you'd like into the dungeon. You can check this on and off. You don't want the dungeon to build the special rooms. And then you can do two things right now. The special rooms only have two primary variables here. One is the location in the dungeon. So 0 would be the starting room, 1 would be the ending room. So boss at the end, starting room at the start. And then I've got a shop showing up in the middle. And then there's a spawn chance variable. So you can kind of give it a % chance of whether or not it will spawn every time a dungeon's generated, which I think is going to come in really handy for like special rooms and stuff like that later. So if we click build dungeon now, ta-da, we get our whole dungeon. Now this probably isn't too different from the last time you guys saw this video. Actually, I'm just realizing right now I forgot to add in a new trick to the starting room, but I'll do that after this. So you can see right here, this is a layout for the shop room that I've built. Nothing too crazy fancy just yet, just kind of like a rough blocking out to get a piece of it here. This is the boss room. So I've decided to go with the teleport system on the boss room. I really struggled back and forth with this decision, but I think in the long run I want to have as much flexibility over the boss room as possible, and trying to have him in the middle of all these other rooms. Basically there's two options I had to kind of decide from. Either we build it like this where we have a large we have a teleporter, or we take all of these other rooms and we scale them up. And so what I did is I ran around the dungeon for a little while, and I'm only doing 15 room dungeons right now, and I actually realized like this takes a really long time to get through all the rooms just walking. So I thought if we have a boss room and we kind of scale everything up so I have the size I want with boss rooms, all the dungeon rooms are going to get way too large. And there's not really a great way to kind of stitch all these things together without adding a ton of crazy custom rules and stuff. So yeah, so what happens is the boss room is actually way over here. And this is kind of a common technique in games where you just throw it way out of the way so that it'll never interfere with this. And then the other thing that I've done is I've taken these rooms. So we'll take the boss room, for example, wherever it is. Here it is, Desert Boss Portal. And I've added an attachment script. And what this does is you can take the attachment script and you can add it on any customizable room prefab that you've created for the dungeon. And then you can pass it custom rules based off of the dungeon generation script. So that's been really handy, because what I wanted to do was, instead of basically every room just picks from one of 15 prefabs based on the connecting neighbor rooms, which I think is really cool because prefabs are a little bit heavy, but it lets me create just like a ton of variations really easily. And as I showed you guys earlier, we made this prefab list so you can create a bunch of different variations of all the different rooms that can spawn. Right now it's currently disabled, but I'm also going to eventually add in a spawn waiting, so it will have a wait assigned to every prefab when it generates the dungeon. So all these up, down, blah, blah, blah rooms are all your standard rooms, and then we don't have it right now, but I want to put a separator so it's obvious. And these are all your special rooms. So what ends up happening is it's going to pick one of all these prefabs, and I think that's a really good system. But for these special rooms, I don't want to have to generate 15 variations based on how they get connected to. So for example, this boss room has 4 bridges attached to it. Well, you'll see when we actually play the game and run everything that one of those are going to disappear. And that's basically why I built in this custom rule system. So when you, whatever you wanted to pass off for information from the dungeon generator can be passed into this Produn SR attachment script. So that's something that would require a little bit of customization for coding if anybody was kind of, I guess, trying to use this system for their games instead of just the way I've got it up and running. But yeah. So anyways, that's an option now as well. So I can't fully remember exactly what I said in the last video right now. I believe the gates and everything were in and the bridges were in, so this is probably no new information watching these kind of pop up, block your path. There's every room has its own individual tracker for how many enemies are left. So what's going to happen is these will keep you locked in until you finish clearing all the enemies. So yeah, that's pretty much the gate system that I've decided to implement. Shop room obviously has no gates because there's are not going to be any enemies in the shop room ever. And yeah, so everything's coming along really well. One issue I still need to fix that's kind of bugging me is I don't know why, but Unity is rendering white as gray right now, which feels a little bit weird. I suppose I could probably take out the gates for the boss room too, but I kind of liked the concept that maybe you don't know if there's going to be bad guys. Plus, they don't really do anything negative either way. So yeah, the combat system as well is something that I've been working out. Right now I'm trying out a really funky system where there's no root or pause to your running, so you can kind of run and stab at the same time. And what ends up happening is, instead of a melee system, it plays more kind of like a landmine system, where you can leave the attack kind of out in front of you. Another thing that you can do with this, I believe I've got this somewhere kicking around here, power up test, ta-da. So I've built in a power up system that's going to, actually why don't we play this all the way through with this, and it'll be a great way to show you guys. So the power up system is going to have an effect on multiple things, but I just built in like a bunch of placeholder power ups. So these black and white ones are a range modifier, and the red one is a damage modifier. So damage is a little less visual, so why don't we grab a few of these range ones. So that's about the standard size of your attack. As you grab that, you can actually see it scale up in real time if you grab it while you've got an attack out. So now we have this gigantic attack. I made it ludicrously big just for testing purposes. And right now it doesn't kind of kick in front of you any further, but I think in the long run I would. And then the other thing this can do is there's a bunch of power-ups that can actually swap your attacks, although I don't have those built into the game just yet. So you can switch out which kind of attack style you've got. And so I'm trying this out. I'm still very uncertain about the combat system. I know it's an incredibly important part of the game, so I want to make sure I get it right. But yeah, why don't I show you guys this little piece here. So I built this little crystal. I built a little script into all of the rooms, and what they do is it spawns these little rocks randomly, and then it adds a random amount of float and rotation to all the rocks. So just to give the atmosphere a little bit more oomph. And then when I can kind of populate things with clouds as well, I think it's going to look really cool, like you're really up in the mountains. So this crystal was kind of the spawning idea of when I was looking at the rotation. I had an old script on these rocks I was looking at, and I was like, oh, it's not very good. So I wrote a new one, and it's really cool. You can add in a random amount of variance to any sort of rotation on any axis or anything you want. So I'm starting to get a really nice little code base that I quite like. Then when you approach the crystal, it kind of activates, and you get a bit of a visual effect letting you know you're within range. And yeah, if you attack when you're here, then we get this effect where we kind of just fade out and fade back in. I'm not loving that effect yet, but it's perfectly fine for now. So this brings us over to this little island, which is going to give us access over here to the boss room with your kind of cool little swooshy bridge thing that I built in. So this is going to fly and build itself for you as you run across. And yeah, this gives us full access all the way across to the boss room, and then upon entering the boss room, ta-da, we've got the sand boss back in the game. So I've done some updates to the textures and everything on here, and some of the pieces that we've got kicking around on this little plot of land. And I decided to take out the stalagmite bottom piece, so you just have this floating block for the bosses. It's a little janky right now, but I'm just kind of starting to feel this out as I go through this. So anyways, same thing as usual. If you stab the boss, you get a stab effect. As I said, it kind of works like a landmine system, so if I leave a shot there, you can see him take a hit kind of late on into it. He still has two of his basic attacks, this little gray blob that shoots around the ground, and then this move is actually a little broken right now because of the way the dungeon generates. It's actually generating off to the side, but it is, if I reposition it, it is generating the grid-based pattern that you have to fight with this boss. So he needs a little bit of work. Probably should grab some of those damage power-ups, make this go a little bit faster. Ooh, something's getting weirdly laggy there. Definitely gonna have to look into that. So this boss needs to be redesigned. I built him he was one of the first things I built into the game when I came back to it. So I still like his general premise as a boss. I just need to update all this stuff so it's a little bit smoother. But yeah, you can kill him, down he goes, and ta-da, you've now felled the first boss of the dungeon. So I'm going to start working on getting some enemies and getting those room spawning tools in. I'll try to fix whatever this random giant FPS drop is. That's very weird. Something must be being generated that it shouldn't be. Yeah, so anyways, that is the current status of all the cool stuff that I built over the last couple of days. God, yeah, I don't know. There's so many different pieces of all this going together now that, yeah, I think that's a pretty good recap. So, Jump back over to my face reel here. I got all that in under 10 minutes. I'm going to prattle on for another minute or two if you don't mind me just giving you guys a full update on everything and my future plans. I try to make sure I share thoughts as well as progress. So yeah, there's just a ton of scripting going into all of this. Even like to build the crystal to get you to teleport, I had to build like a trigger around the crystal, and then when you enter the trigger, the regular controls needed to change so that they are able to adapt and allow you to use an interactable object. I've never had an interactable object in the game until now. So now there's a system in place where I could insert new interactable objects if I wanted to, and they could all have their own individual effect. Basically what it does is just overrides the standard input controller attached to the player and tells it like don't do attacking as long if you're in the interactable range, and on trigger enter, on trigger exit, we just turn that flag on and off, and that kind of lets you do whatever you want, which allows the crystal to take control of that button for that brief period of time. And then I also set a lock on the character so you don't have control. So the problem is that fade out is actually just putting a white screen over or a white image over the screen, and what was happening is I was able to run around. I could fall off the edge and stuff while that was happening. It would break a lot of things. So yeah, so I built all that in. I built a little custom teleporter script to bring you way out to where the boss room is every time accurately. So as I said, the boss, he was programmed originally in one room with one room only. So the problem right now is he's got this grid-based attack system that draws the grid for most of his attacks. Well, that's not positioned local to the room. It's positioned with actual world space. So I just need to update that from world space to local space. We should be good to go. But I want it to be variable, so that gets hard because you need to grab local space, but you can't exactly take like a room's width, and you'd have to maybe, I'll set 4 points to kind of draw it out or something. I don't know. There's a lot of ways to do that. It's late. Not doing it today, that's for sure. I also want to take the old shop information and port it over to the new shop room and have the objects in there that are purchasable for currency. And yeah, as I've been saying for a long time now, the game is going to really quickly feel like it all falls into place. So I'm hoping to get as much of that done as I can, because I've got about 2.5 weeks until I change countries, and then I will definitely need to take a decent break from doing this full-time. Well, I won't be able to do it full-time for the extended future unless one of my loyal 11 viewers decides to fully fund my life, in which case let me know, but it's going to get pricey because I'm heading to Ireland. So yeah, not cheap rent there. I am not pleased with the cost of living. I've been very, very happy and accustomed to the Japanese cost of things, and it's pretty reasonable here. So anyways, yeah, that's the future plans for me. I'm going to keep building the game as much as I can get done before then. I'm hoping to have as many systems in place, because a lot of the work that needs to get done is just going to be like enemy design, programming them. But if I have the whole world in place and I already have kind of a system in place for how to design them and I just have to plop them in, then it's just months and months of work, but it's kind of like tediously repetitive, which is sort of nice, because if I go to a job 8 hours a day and I'm tired when I get home, I can work on something I know how to do. The hard part for me is to constantly be kind of coming up with new systems and new ideas for how all these things work, because there's a lot of really frustrating programming that goes into this. And when I have all day and I can take a break for like an hour or two in the middle of the day when I want, I wish companies were more flexible with that, but they generally aren't. So yeah, it's just been really nice. I'm trying to get all these systems ready to go so they're as close as can be. I obviously can't finish all of them before I leave, but I'm pretty happy with the progress. So that's how the world's looking right now. The art is in this state. This is how everything's kind of fitting together, and it's starting to feel a bit like a video game. So let me know what you guys think. I'd really appreciate hearing some feedback, especially with, should I root the character when he attacks? Do you think it's kind of cool to have him throwing that out there as he runs around? I can tell you from playing feedback, it feels really good to be able to move constantly. It doesn't feel good to use a ranged attack system in this game. It just feels too like, I mean, maybe if I made it twin stick and went full bullet hell, but I like this attacking melee system. It fits really well with the controls. They feel really nice, but the attacks, I'm not sure if I should lock you in position or not. I'm just worried, not so much that it would feel bad. Rooting feels more natural for a melee attack system, but I like the fluidity of always being able to move, and I think that is going to allow for some pretty ridiculous enemy programming. So let me know what your thoughts are. That'd be great, and thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you next time with my next update. Have a great evening, day, or whatever. As always, see you soon.